Hi there. So the results of the French presidential election are in, and Macron has won with 66% of the votes. I've kind of been expecting Marine Le Pen to lose ever since she came in second in the first round. Most people had her pegged to come first in the first round and then lose in the second round. Having come in second in the first round, her chances of winning overall were drastically reduced. So in this video, I want to look at the reasons why Marine Le Pen has lost and what's likely to happen with France and even Brexit going ahead. So one of the first reasons that Marine Le Pen lost is that she was never able to shake the image of a far-right anti-Semitic party. There have been many scandals and much coverage on this throughout the media. Some of it is, there seems to be something a bit sinister to what some of the members of the Front National have said, and others just seem like the media just trying to get a cheap shot in on the Front National by purposely asking these provocative questions and trying to elicit some sort of response that would work in their favour against the Front National. But this ultimately has just cast a very negative image on the party altogether. And another thing regarding the image of Front National, and specifically Marine Le Pen, is that she was compared to, and she even compared herself to, Donald Trump. Now the problem is that Europe really hates Donald Trump, and it's one of the reasons why Geert Wilders lost as well. He tried to compare himself to a sort of Dutch Donald Trump as well. This just didn't work. You have to understand that a lot of the support for Brexit or for Donald Trump came from the alternative media. And this just didn't get translated to Europe. There's kind of a language barrier there in essence. The mainstream media, the pro-European stuff during the EU referendum in Britain, that all got translated. The pro-Hillary Clinton stuff, that all got translated. But the forums, the comments, the YouTube videos, the independent media, the alternative media, none of that really got translated to Europe. So they never really got a fair counter-argument to what was being proposed by the mainstream. So it's no wonder really that they have this really bad image of Donald Trump. So trying to compare yourself to Donald Trump in Europe is not a very smart idea. For any of the populist candidates going forward, that's a really bad tactic to be using. France also didn't really suffer the same betrayal that the UK and the US did regarding the Iraq War. Sure, they went through the financial and the euro crisis just like we did, and that would give them a reason to be very mistrustful of the establishment, but they didn't go through the same lies. They didn't have their soldiers killed the same way we did regarding the Iraq War. And this just hasn't pushed France over the edge like it did with the UK and with the US. It was a massive factor. I actually done another video on this to give you a wee bit more insight into why we in the UK and US mistrust the establishment. Now, I was personally wrong on something. I completely underestimated the combat vote. This was the idea that people would be voting just against Marine Le Pen. It didn't matter who the other candidate was, they were just going to vote against Marine Le Pen. I completely underestimated that, but it turns out it's been a very important factor in Marine Le Pen's defeat. But this is also important for Macron to note, because it doesn't necessarily mean that people voted for him so much as voted against Marine Le Pen. That's going to be a major issue for him going forward, and I'll discuss that in a wee bit. But I will also note that Macron's popularity only really became significant after Fillon's scandal. Unlike Marine Le Pen, who had pretty consistent support the whole way through, Macron didn't really have a strong core base like Marine Le Pen did. And again, this is going to be a thorn in his side come the future. Another factor was that the markets seemed to get spooked at the idea of Marine Le Pen victory. Investors were becoming worried, obviously with the idea of Marine Le Pen pulling out of the euro and with the potential of Brexit. They became a bit spooked. I do find it very odd. How free can a country be if you're being held hostage by the markets? You know, if you're afraid to vote for the wrong person in case things go a little bit economically wobbly, I do have to ask just how free a country in that situation can really be. But nevertheless, it managed to spook the French voters out of voting for Marine Le Pen. This gave Macron an opportunity to woo those voters with his banking past. Oh, look at me, I know economics, I'll keep you all safe. Yeah, but not from Islamic terror, right? As you called it, an imponderable problem. But anyway, I do think, however, she was being just a bit too protectionist as well. She did pledge to introduce a tax on firms for hiring foreign workers. I think that's just going a wee bit too far for my liking. Um, if you do want French companies to hire French citizens, you would be best to encourage them to do so via incentives rather than punish them for not doing so. That seems like something the EU would do. So that was a bad idea from my perspective. And also, kind of like Geert Wilders, her manifesto was a bit skimpy on domestic economic policy. And again, just like Geert Wilders, she focused a bit too much on immigration and ISIS and the EU, really. She could have went into a bit more detail, tried to reassure voters on what her domestic economic policy would be, but she didn't really have too much detail on that. And that was a bit of a problem. And one of the problems with focusing too much on immigration, or specifically Islamic terror, should I say, is that it seems to be like flogging a dead horse. Because France has, for lack of a better term, learned to live with it. It's sad to say, and it's sad to see, but unfortunately, France is just numb to terrorism at this point. They're just, it's just part of their everyday life. They've just accepted it. And that's worrying to me, but what can you do, really? Marine Le Pen, it's also said, performed very poorly in the French presidential debates. In the first round, she was touted as being a loser during the free-for-all, and that might help account for why she came in second in the first round. And in the second debate, she once again was touted as performing very, very badly, with many saying it was something of a mudslinging match. And again, you can see the polling after the debate, her favourability plummets quite a bit. So evidently the French people did not see her as a good performer during the debates, which I find a little bit surprising, but again, that can be linked back to her lack of domestic economic policy. And one of the most significant things I think that led to Macron winning over Le Pen was that Macron has learned lessons from Mark Rutte and Theresa May. Now, if you remember back to the Dutch elections, Mark Rutte got very, very tough on the Turkish politicians who were trying to campaign for Erdogan's referendum in the Netherlands. He told them that they weren't allowed to campaign there, and that appealed very much to Geert Wilders' voting base, and he managed to steal some of their his voters away from Geert Wilders. Theresa May similarly has won quite well over UKIP by appealing to UKIP's voting base, and in fact in Kent, UKIP have lost all their seats, and it's probably going to be a very harsh defeat for UKIP coming into the general election. So lessons have been learned there on how to take these populist voters, and Macron done the same thing. During the campaign, he spouted that the EU must reform or it's going to face Frexit. So he obviously stole some of Marine Le Pen's voters by trying to appeal to Euroscepticism. And it's not just Marine Le Pen's voters, Mélenchon also had his base of Eurosceptics as well, and he managed to woo some of them over as well, and possibly even some of Fillon's Eurosceptic voters too. But the problem is, if Macron is being hollow with those words, in the long term, he's going to enrage France. So those are the reasons why I think Marine Le Pen really lost the election. So going ahead then, I'm going to sort of discuss what I think the possible consequences of this could be. So Macron is a globalist and a Europhile. In his own words, he said, "In this current environment, when extremes and anti-globalization win elections, that is probably the best moment for France to do the opposite." Jean-Claude Juncker has said he's delighted with his pro-EU stance and he welcomes his presidency. So we know that he's not going to be able to appease Marine Le Pen's voting base. He's not very likely to appease Mélenchon's base as well, due to his banking past and his establishment connections. And honestly, if he doesn't actually manage to reform the EU heavily, I don't think he'll be able to appease Fillon's voters. He just doesn't really have the support of the French people. Like I said earlier, people were really voting against Marine Le Pen so much as for Macron. There's been protests against Macron as well. He doesn't really have, popular support. In fact, nearly 25% of people in France abstained or had a protest vote in this election. According to a poll, 61% of French youth are ready for a large-scale revolt. 44% of 18 to 24-year-olds in France backed Le Pen. That's really bad news for Macron. So going forward, he has to be aware of the growing Eurosceptic voters. If he fails to appease them, he's just going to anger them and pretty much guarantee that someone Eurosceptic will become the president in 2022. So he has to be aware of that, but I don't think he has what it takes to appease them. I don't think he can unite France, and I think over the next 5 years there is going to be a lot of scrutiny against him, a lot of criticism, and growing anger towards the EU. So I'm personally convinced he's going to make the situation worse. I think his talks of reform are just hollow words. And one of the reasons I think this is because Macron has already stated that he plans to put sanctions on Poland. And of course he's talked about Brexit too, where he wants to steal away our bankers and things like this, because he said he must do what he can to protect the European Union.
If your government decides to organize a Brexit, I will be pretty tough on it, because I think it cannot
be tough on it.
Yes, because we have to preserve the rest of the European Union.
With any luck, Macron will be heavily scrutinised and criticised, which should hopefully limit the scope of his powers. This would be the optimal position for us and for France as well, because they can't expect much good to come out of him getting his own way. With that having been said, thanks for watching the video, and feel free to leave a comment below on what you think a Macron presidency is going to look like.